good evening to you all. It's Tuesday night, so that means we have a few questions to answer. First of which is, can you explain if we keep the 8 precepts in the range retreat, will it help our practice? The short answer is yes. I'm not sure what your background is in the practice, but often the range retreat is a time people take on the 8 precepts, where normally they may only keep 5 precepts, or maybe 8 precepts once a week, something like that. But it is quite traditional to use the vasa, the range retreat, as a time to keep 8 precepts, whether you're staying in a monastery or at home. And the purpose of the 8 precepts is to draw out more effort and energy and give you more discipline in your practice. So particularly to support the practice of meditation and training the mind. Because you have the 5 precepts, which are already a very good basis for training yourself in harmlessness and restraint and mindfulness of speech and actions and so on. But the 8 precepts increases your practice of renunciation. So like the 6th precept, you're undertaking not to eat after midday. So that simplifies your life. You only eat in the morning, and maybe only 1 meal a day, or 2 is okay before midday. But you're eating less, which means you spend less time searching and preparing food, cleaning up. So it frees up the second half of your day for meditation, which is, most people find after a while of practicing with the 8 precepts very beneficial. And sometimes you need to give yourself that boost to your discipline by undertaking the 8 precepts, so that you give up eating afternoon. And sometimes you need to make it as a clear determination. And part of the benefit of the 8 precepts, taking them, is that you give up food afternoon. Keeps your body light for meditation, because as you know, if you've just had a big meal, meditating is a bit difficult after that, because you're sleepy and your energy has all gone into digestion. Whereas as time progresses through the day, your body becomes lighter as you've digested your food. That frees up a lot of mental energy for meditation. So the 8 precepts are very suitable for supporting meditation, particularly in the evening. And then the 7th precept is to refrain from entertainment, sports, personal adornments, clothing and decoration, your jewelry and so on. So again, you're streamlining your lifestyle by taking on the 8 precepts. You're avoiding entertainments, sports, wearing jewelry, perfumes and so on. So you're minimizing the mind's outflows into sensuality. So things like entertainments and sport, music, movies and so on. You're minimizing the exposure to that so that your mind can focus on the Dhamma, particularly developing mindfulness and then overcoming the hindrances in the practice of meditation, developing samadhi. The more complex our life is, the more distractions, different pursuits we have, then of course the mind is flowing out through its senses all the time, so it's much harder to train in meditation. particularly developing one-pointedness, samadhi, and even development of vipassana. If your life is too complicated and full of too many distractions, you're eating in the evening and socializing and going to entertainments and so on, then it's harder work to train the mind in mindfulness and contemplation of the three characteristics: impermanence, unsatisfactoriness, not self. So the 8 precepts are ideal for developing meditation, developing the path. The last one is keeping to a simple bed, so whether it's a mat on the floor or a thin mattress, and also sleeping alone, because you're keeping the 3rd precept, which is celibacy, a brahmacharya. You're not engaging any sexual activity. So if you do have a partner, you sleep separately from your partner when you keep the 8 precepts. So you're simplifying your life, you're dedicating time more to meditation, so you sleep a bit less, maybe sleeping on a simple bed, and you just sleep for keeping the body healthy rather than as an indulgence. So if you take on the 8 precepts, that can really boost your practice. These are the precepts of somebody who can get to the level of anagami, a non-returner in their meditation. So very supportive for training the mind both in morality and in meditation, samadhi. It does bring up some problems sometimes, because if you're keeping the 8 precepts and the people around you are not, then you're kind of out of sync with them maybe. So a very common one is if you have a family or a partner and they end up not keeping the 8 precepts, well, they'll want to eat in the evening when you're not, and so that can lead to some friction or disappointment, or just, they want to do one thing, you want to do another. So you have to talk to them, I guess, and get an agreement is best, so that they know exactly what you're doing and why, and agree to your keeping the 8 precepts. Some people are very good at this, and they know how to get everyone on side, and sometimes you even see people being very heroic, and they keep the 8 precepts themselves, but they still cook for the rest of the family in the evening, but they don't eat themselves. They're just doing it as an act of kindness for their family, and they cook and serve a meal to others. Or you're living in a household where other people engage in recreation, entertainments and so on, but you don't, and you just have to put up with that. So it's not ideal maybe, but you make the best of the world you're in, and if you can keep the 8 precepts, all the better. Or going to work, it can be a challenge, can't it? If you keeping the 8 precepts and you go out to work all day, you come home, you're tired, maybe hungry, tired, you want to eat, but you're keeping the 8 precepts. So there are other things you can take in the evening, fruit juice, certain what we call medicinal requisites like cheese, dark chocolate, ginger. There's a few things you can have just to give you energy in the evening, because that is a challenge if you've been using a lot of physical energy through the day. So you have to see whether they fit into your lifestyle, the 8 precepts. And if it's too difficult, too challenging, well, you can keep the 5 precepts, and that's all right. You can still progress in your Dhamma practice of mindfulness, 4 foundations of mindfulness, developing the 7 factors of enlightenment. You can attain to stream entry, keeping the 5 precepts. But if you're ready, well, why not try keeping the 8 precepts? Go for an upgrade in your effort in the practice. So Another question. Luang Por, in the path of practice to keep contemplating anicca, dukkha, anatta in our experience, till the mind clearly sees these three characteristics in the five khandhas and will then naturally let go. Yes, if you clearly see the three characteristics of impermanence, dukkha, unsatisfactoriness, and anatta, the selfless nature of physical, mental phenomena in the five khandhas, then that is helping you to break through delusion. So it will lead to the letting go or relinquishment of attachment, which is what you're aiming for in the practice. We unwittingly, habitually, blindly, deludedly attach to the five khandhas. That's form, physical form, feeling, the tone of experience, pleasant, unpleasant, or neither pleasant nor unpleasant. Perception, which is the way you remember things. Sankharas, mental formations, the karma-making aspect of the mind. And then sense consciousness. We, because of our delusion and our lack of understanding of the process by which suffering arises, we attach automatically to these five khandhas as self, as me, mine, myself. We cling to them, we hold on to them, we identify with them, and then we suffer because of that. So if you can see the suffering of that attachment, then you want to let go. So Ajahn Chah used to say, they're like something that's hot. When you hold something that's burning hot, you immediately put it down because you don't want to have that pain and you don't want to burn and damage your skin. So you immediately drop it. So if you could really see the five khandhas in all their aspects as impermanent, unsatisfactory, not self, you would let go. Your mind would automatically let go. And occasionally we see that. In the beginning of our practice, it's just once in a while we notice that we're holding on to a certain way of thinking, a certain view, and we're suffering, so we let it go. We may have that realization sometimes. If you're angry and then you realize, I don't want to be angry and suffer with this anger anymore. I'm going to just accept whatever it is that's hard to accept, or forgive the person that needs to be forgiven, and stop dwelling on that angry thought, that angry perception. You might get to that point, so you drop it. Why do we cling on to things that are causing us suffering? Is because of unwise attention, lack of mindfulness, lack of insight. We identify, we cling on to thoughts and the feelings and the perceptions. But if you ever notice that that's leading to suffering, then you want to drop it, give it up, let it go. Or say your body, we all want this body to be absolutely healthy and bring us lots of pleasure and stay good looking, but it doesn't do it. It doesn't respond to that command when we give the command. The body, this physical body that we identify with is the biggest con artist in the world. It tricks us all the time because we look after it, feed it, clothe it, bathe it, pamper it, do all kinds of things to it to make it give us what we want, which is pleasure from good health and strength, and it doesn't do it. It keeps letting us down, doesn't it? It keeps reneging on all this pampering and spoiling, that we spoil it, and then it doesn't give us what we want in return. Even the pleasure we get with the body doesn't last very long. So it's constantly letting us down. So when you see that, you start to accept, this body is not going to give me endless pleasure and happiness. So you'll start letting go of some of those delusions, those wrong views, and that can lead to peace. Doesn't it? When you see it's impermanent, it's beyond your control, it's a source of dukkha. What's one of the words they use in Thai? It's a nest. They use the same word as a nest for a bird. It's a nest of dukkha. This body is just kind of storing up dukkha for you, ready to come out, pounce on you at any moment. Pain can come at any moment in your life, a painful feeling, whether it's just aches and pains from moving around, doing things, or from illness, or heat or cold, whatever. You get pain at any moment, and you really can't predict and you can't prevent that very well. Spend a lot of time and effort in our life trying to keep this body free from pain and discomfort, and we're not very successful at it. So when you see that, then the mind starts to relinquish its clinging to the body or the automatic identification. So it's enough. I'm not going to bother about it anymore. Let it be what it is, it is. I'll accept that. It is what it is. And feeling, which is very closely related to the body, is the same, isn't it? You want pleasure and you don't like pain, but you can't control it, because they're conditioned things. And however much you try to attain pleasure, you're never completely successful. But when you establish mindfulness and direct your mind to observe, contemplate these 5 khandhas, whether it's physical khandha or mental khandha, you start to see the truth and you start to let go. One part of the practice is just getting your mind to the point where it can see the khandhas as they are. So establishing mindfulness, clarity, and then investigating the truth from a place of mindfulness, clear comprehension. So you're not forming any particular opinion, you're just observing the way things are in these 5 khandhas. And then when you see that they are a source of suffering, when you cling to them, your mind wants to let go. When you're in a state of peace in meditation, when you practice mindfulness on one object, which is still part of the khandhas, but it's a subtle kind of experience. When your mind becomes calm in samadhi, you've let go of the coarseness of the khandhas, so you stop wriggling around in samadhi. You stop breathing heavily and sighing, feeling weighed down by your body. You stop all the mental proliferation and agitation of mind and all the different negative emotions that come up all the time in daily life. They all disappear. And there's still a subtle manifestation of your khandhas. You have some pleasant feeling. You have the one-pointed object of the mind. So the khandhas are still there, but they're very subtle. So the coarseness of the suffering of the khandhas disappears. So it gives you a kind of taste of what it is to let go of the khandhas. So if you develop samadhi regularly, it's not nibbana, but it's helping you to get a good comparison between states of suffering, states of non-suffering, and then letting go. Another question. If someone doesn't like you and causes you trouble and won't change, what can you do? Let go. The short answer. Let it go. Accept them the way they are and let it go. Obviously, it depends on the situation, I guess. If that person is seriously causing you trouble, well, you may have to protect yourself in some way. So one way is get away from them, avoid them if it's possible. If it's not possible, then you have to be very careful around that person, because they can cause you trouble. They can cause you pain, hardship, difficulty in one way or another. So you have to be very careful how you deal with them if you can't avoid them or get away from them. But at least sometimes you'll be able to get away from them and you can enjoy that freedom, that peace. When you're with them, you have to be very mindful and maybe practice a lot of kindness and compassion, at the very least towards your own feelings of dislike for the person. You have to bring up the tolerance of those feelings that are coming up because of that person's behavior. And that will help you to be more at ease with the person and maybe even improve the relations, because if you're more at ease in yourself, you'll do less things to provoke them and antagonize them, so that might help. And it will soften your attitude when you're dealing with them as a troublemaker or a difficult person. You're not just dealing with them from a place of aggression, aversion, anger, ill will. You're coming from a place of kindness, compassion, understanding, tolerance, even if their behavior is bad. It's better to come from that place. Not easy, but it's better to do it than to come from a place of aversion. That tends to make the whole thing worse. You have to accept some people won't change. Well, you can't change them. Maybe it's not your job. You're not the one to change them. They have to change themselves. So that's another adjustment of your view, isn't it? Maybe you've tried to change them or help them or improve things, and it has only gone so far, and then there's nothing more you can do. So you may have to let go and reflect wisely that there's nothing you can do at this point. So you just accept them the way they are, and they'll have to do whatever they need to do to change or improve. So in Buddhism, this is the quality of upekkha, Brahmavihara. So it's one of the 4 sublime attitudes. These are positive emotions. So even equanimity, when you have equanimity towards someone who won't change, won't improve, is a positive quality. It's not indifference in the sense of not caring, but it's accepting that person's character or behavior is really deeply ingrained and there's not much you can do to change them. So you're just accepting that and not letting yourself go into frustration or aversion because they won't change. One monk used to say, people are like, they all have their different karma, their different characters, and some you get on well with and some you don't, and some like you and some don't. And you have to accept that. And if you're endlessly trying to change other people, you're always going to be very worn out by that process, and you'll always be suffering because you'll be thinking so much about them. And it's not very fruitful, maybe. And he used to say it's like going to the zoo and you see all the different animals in the zoo. And why do people go to zoos? It's because they have all these different animals. It's sort of interesting and entertaining. But if you go to the zoo and you expect the bears to be like the elephants and the tigers to be like the snakes or the crocodiles to be like the hippos, you're going to be suffering because they're not, and they won't be, and they never will be. And if you spend your time saying, why aren't the crocodiles like the hippos? Why aren't the snakes like the tigers? It's impossible, so don't waste your time. Just accept they're different, they are the way they are, and try and see the good in each one, but don't expect them to be any different than they are. And people are like that, and sometimes you just have to accept someone. If you can see the good in them, all the better. The last question here. Hello, Ajahn. I have a question, even though it might sound silly. I have always wondered, since the Buddha had psychic powers, why he had to walk from Bodh Gaya to Varanasi to teach the first 5 disciples. So that's a reference to tomorrow, the full moon day, when it's called Asalaha Puja, the full moon in July, when we remember the day the Buddha gave his first teaching in the deer park, Varanasi. And so after his enlightenment, which took place at Bodh Gaya under the Bodhi tree, the texts say he walked to Varanasi to teach his 5 friends who he'd previously been practicing with when he was doing the extreme ascetic practices. And he thought they might understand the Dhamma that he had understood, so he walked there to teach them. So that's an act of compassion. And it was successful because Venerable Kondanyo heard the teaching and it opened the Dhammarai. It became a stream enterer listening to the first sermon of the Buddha, the Dhammacakka Sutta. Why didn't he just fly there or use his psychic powers just to turn up there rather than have to walk? Well, I don't know. I wasn't there. Well, I don't know. We can't be for sure. Even with the texts and the words of the Buddha and the texts that we have, you can't actually be 100% sure what actually happened. Perhaps he could have used his psychic powers to just turn up there, spontaneously appear. But perhaps there's a benefit of the Buddha walking through the countryside. That means he's going to take time and people will have a chance to offer food to him, see him. And if you do read the text, you'll see people see the Buddha, they're inspired by his appearance, his peaceful, serene appearance, the radiant aura coming from the Buddha. If they've offered food to the Buddha, they've made a lot of good karma doing that. And if he walks to Varanasi, it's going to take a few days, at least a few weeks. And there's a lot of chance for people to offer, a place to stay, food, drink to the Buddha, listen to the Dhamma. Maybe even if he hasn't given his first sermon, he may have said a few words on his way. You can imagine it's possible, even if it's not recorded. So there would be good opportunities, you would think, as the Buddha is walking through the countryside, for good things to happen for people. And one of the roles of a Buddha is to teach Buddhism, we say, to the many folk, to many people. And there's many ways the Buddha taught. One is simply through example, being a peaceful samana in the countryside, walking through forests, villages. That in itself is a teaching. And there's devas who also are witnessing the Buddha and giving their anumodana and being happy. There's human beings. And we know some people just see the Buddha already, it brings joy to their heart. And so the Buddha spent 45 years walking around northern India, inspiring people with his words, but also with his presence, his example, in so many ways. And once people got to know a Buddha as a Buddha, they have this great faith, especially in India, but not just in India, in other parts of the world nowadays. But in those days, in India, people had the view an enlightened Buddha is special. Even if they don't exactly know what the Buddha's teaching yet, they have this idea, this concept of a Buddha is there in society. So if a Buddha comes to town and somebody, the Buddha himself or somebody else says, I'm a Buddha, or he is a Buddha, that brings up a lot of joy. And you can imagine word of mouth, people would spread that joy and that message, oh, the Buddha is here. And this is in the 2,500 years ago. There's no internet, nobody has a smartphone, there's no newspapers, no TV, no telephones. Word of mouth, though, may have sent a message around, the Buddha is here, and everyone gets excited. and they go out to see the Buddha. Maybe they just bow in front of a Buddha, or they offer some food if he's on alms round. Many good things could happen just with the Buddha walking around India, as well as teachings, So that was their good fortune. Our loss, we haven't been born this life in the time of the Buddha. We still have the Buddhist teachings, so that's our gain, but we aren't able to meet a living Buddha. But they could, so that was their good fortune. And as I've quoted a few times, there's a few teachers who mentioned that when people ask, why do, in this world we live in 7 billion people, why are some people born in a country that has a reasonable government, healthcare system, they're reasonably well off, not too many disasters, wars, poverty, whereas some other people are born into poverty or a disaster zone or a place where the government is not very strong. What are those differences? Where have they come from? What is the karma that makes somebody born into a good place and somebody born into a difficult situation? And one of them is people who have previously offered food or requisites to a Buddha. That karma is so strong, it tends to follow them for many lifetimes. So they may be reborn in a place where they're fairly well off and they're not starving and they're not struggling. That partly may be because they've previously met a Buddha, heard Dhamma from the Buddha, seen a Buddha, made offerings to a Buddha. So that's one of the duties of a Buddha, is to help many people and walk around the countryside doing that. So those are a few questions and answers tonight. We hope they were helpful to you, and we are celebrating the Buddha's first teaching tomorrow night, and then the night after that is the first night entering the 3 months range retreat. So it's a special time of year for the monastic community and for the lay people, yourselves, who support and engage with the monastic community. Hopefully it's a special time for you, and maybe it's a time to focus on your practice, what you can do in the next 3 months to improve your practice. Anyway, for tonight we'll leave it there, and wish you all well.